Hello everyone, friends. In today's review, we will analyze in detail the situation around Ukraine as of January 24th, 2026. Let's turn to the map of combat operations. So friends, the past 24 hours have again brought very positive news in terms of advancement. It is noteworthy that, despite rumors floating in the air about certain backstage agreements, this does not affect the pace of the offensive. Russian army units continue to move forward steadily, fulfilling combat missions and occupying both settlements and significant areas of territory. We will start today's review from the north of the Kharkiv region. You have probably noticed that recently we often start the analysis specifically with the area of responsibility of the North grouping. This is due to their significant successes and increased activity. In particular, over the past 24 hours, full control was established over the village of Semenovka, where the advance within the residential area was about 3 kilometers. In addition, Russian fighters advanced in Grafskoye, reaching the center of the settlement. Literally in the day before yesterday's issue, I mentioned that ARF forces had entered this village and predicted that the fighting there would not last longer than a week or two. However, reality is ahead of forecasts. The situation is developing rapidly. In just 2 days, assault groups covered 900 meters through the built-up area, and fighting is already taking place in the center of Grafskoye. Given the new configuration of the front after the fall of Semenovka, the AFU has practically no chance of holding the village. Looking at the map, you can see for yourself. From the western outskirts of Semenovka to the Seversky Donetsk River is less than 2 kilometers. The actual corridor for the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces has narrowed to a critical 1 kilometer 700 meters. At any moment, Russian troops can cut the highway, and then the AFU garrison will be pinned against the river with no escape routes. I believe the issue with Grafskoye and the surrounding territories will be finally closed before the end of this month. It is worth noting again that after the fall of Volchansk, the AFU defense in this sector began to crumble. If earlier the Russian army advanced here extremely slowly, sometimes treading water, and battles for such villages lasted for months, now we are observing a completely different dynamic. Semenovka was taken in literally a couple of days. Let's move on. The results of the West grouping look no less, and perhaps even more impressive. We are talking about the Kupyansk direction. There is no news on the city itself yet. Fighting continues in the right bank part. A month and a half after the start of the AFU counteroffensive, they have not managed to recapture not only the entire Kupyansk, but even its right bank half. But on the left bank, the RF Armed Forces units have had serious success. Pay attention to the map. The fighters advanced along a broad front of 7.5 kilometers. Here, the Ukrainian army had a kind of pocket, or bridgehead, which they held for a long time thanks to a network of strongholds. Now this salient is practically cut off. Very little remains to close it completely, which will allow increasing pressure on Petropavlovka and eventually capturing it. We have already discussed that, provided combat operations continue and there are no backroom deals, the main task for 2026 is the complete liquidation of the Ukrainian bridgehead on the left bank of the Oskol River. The minimum program is clearing the territory from Boguslavka to Kupyansk, including Kupyansk, Uzlovoy, Kovsharovka, Novosianovo, and Glushkovka. In the ideal scenario, by the end of 2026, the left bank should be completely liberated, from Lozovaya to Kupyansk. At the moment, it is visible how the AFU bridgehead in the Kupyansk area is rapidly shrinking. The reason is obvious. The AFU threw all reserves in December and January into attempts to recapture Kursk, which is why there were simply no forces left to hold positions on the left bank of the Oskol. Proof of this is the capture by the Russian military of more than 13 square kilometers of territory in 24 hours. It remains to clear the remnants of this sector, including Petropavlovka and Kucherovka, after which the front line will change radically. Good news is also coming from Konstantinovka. The information about the advance, which I voiced a couple of issues ago, has been confirmed, specifically the entry of Russian stormtroopers onto Sechkina Street. Moreover, the real success turned out to be larger. The fighters not only established a foothold on Sechkina, but also reached Krivorozhskaya Street. simultaneously taking control of Armeyskaya and Tbilskaya streets. They also managed to clear the forest area near the dachas and advance within the dacha cooperative itself. Thus, the AFU is slowly but surely losing positions in the city. It is important to understand the specifics. There is no massive assault here. The Russian army operates in small infantry groups, methodically biting off street after street. The trend is such that one fine moment the Ukrainian command may discover that half or even the whole city has already been lost. Summing up the overall results of the past 24 hours, active advancement has been recorded in 3 sectors. 1 settlement and 24 square kilometers of territory have passed under the control of the ARF army. No advancements by the AFU have been recorded. Let's move on to the key event that occurred in the Dobropilia direction. Here, servicemen of the center group of forces were able to substantially expand the zone of control on an extended stretch from the settlement of Rudinsky up to the city of Bilytske. To understand the scale, the width of the offensive strip exceeded 8 kilometers. This figure in itself is impressive, but even more important is the fact that RF units managed to enter a new settlement, the city of Bilytske. We have already mentioned earlier that back in mid-December, Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups began to infiltrate the city limits and test the strength of the Ukrainian army's defense. However, during that period, active assault actions were not conducted. Primarily, reconnaissance work was carried out. Now, a full-fledged assault operation has started. You can fix the date. On January 22nd, the Russian army proceeded to the assault of Bilytske. At the same time, the first and quite serious results have already been achieved. Russian fighters managed not only to gain a foothold on the outskirts, but also to establish control over 5 streets at once: Skovoroda, Bohdan Khmelnytsky, Kotyubinsky, Shevtsov, and Gagarin. In addition, judging by the map, 6 multi-story buildings in the south of the city have been occupied. You must agree, the start is powerful. Bilytske is a small city. Before the start of hostilities, about 9,000 to 10,000 people lived there. Nevertheless, here, as in Rudinsky, there is sufficiently dense high-rise development. Therefore, one should not count on an easy walk, or on the fact that the city will pass under the control of the Russian Federation in a matter of days. This will not happen. Let me remind you how difficult the battles for Rudinsky were. This settlement was taken longer than Mirnohrad, although, it would seem, the scales of these cities are incomparable. I believe that the advance here will go faster than in Rudinsky, since the main supply route from Dobropilia is under dense fire control. However, there is a nuance. The mine to the north of the city, which plays the role of a powerful defense hub. Consequently, to guarantee the breaking of the Ukrainian army's resistance, it is necessary to seize this mine. It is precisely on this task that the RF troops are currently working. By the way, footage of combat work has appeared, where the Russian military caught the armed forces of Ukraine during rotation and destroyed an enemy pickup truck. I cannot demonstrate these videos here due to platform rules. As for Rudinsky itself directly, success was also recorded here over the past day. Fighters of the Russian army began to push the front line away from the city in a western direction. The maximum depth of the advance was 1 kilometer 250 meters. Of course, this is not yet enough to claim the complete safety of the city from counterattacks by the armed forces of Ukraine and to relax. Undoubtedly no. However, the process has been launched, and now it will be much more difficult for Ukrainian formations to break into the city, although such a possibility cannot be completely ruled out yet. What else happened at the front? Fierce battles continue in the area of Hryshyn. Now let's political agenda. According to Yuri Ushakov, Vladimir Putin's meeting with Witkov's team lasted about 4 hours. The presidential aide characterized this dialogue as extremely frank, confidential, and exceptionally constructive in content. Meanwhile, the first meeting of the Trilateral Security Working Group in the Russia-USA-Ukraine format started in Abu Dhabi. The key thesis is that without settling territorial disputes, reaching a long-term resolution of the Ukrainian conflict is impossible. At the same time, Russia intends to continue implementing its goals on the battlefield right up to the moment political agreements are reached. During contacts, the American side informed Vladimir Putin about the details of the meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky in Davos. Furthermore, the negotiation agenda included discussing the Peace Council, the situation around Greenland, and other regional problems. Representatives of the RF Ministry of Defense's top leadership are also present in Abu Dhabi, acting according to specific instructions received from President Putin. One of the central topics is the withdrawal of the armed forces of Ukraine from Donbas territory. Moscow emphasizes this is a critical condition of the Russian side. However, the Kremlin considers it inappropriate to publicly disclose the details and framework of the current negotiation process. Regarding finances, just under $5 billion of Russian assets remain frozen in the US at the moment. Russia is considering using these funds to restore territories affected by combat operations, including Donbas. Against this background, it is worth reminding that Zelensky categorically ruled out the possibility of withdrawing troops from the region. Viktor Orban made a harsh statement: Hungary will vote against Ukraine joining the European Union even in 100 years. The reason was a document explicitly pointing to 2027 as the date of Ukraine's accession to the EU. The Hungarian Prime Minister noted that it is not only about the colossal sums, 700 or 800 billion, but also about the integration timeline itself. In his opinion, in the coming century, no parliament in Hungary would support accepting Ukrainians into the EU on such terms. Orban also spoke ironically about the current situation, noting that while Zelensky, figuratively speaking, sits in the saddle backwards, Brussels is ready to pay with army-like determination. As a mockery of Zelensky and EU policy, Orban published an image of a gold credit card with an 800 billion limit. Davos, Kiev's demands, and Brussels' response. Yesterday in Davos, the Ukrainian president, to put it mildly, went beyond the bounds of diplomacy. Besides the usual criticism of the Hungarian government and Orban personally, which is linked to approaching elections in Hungary, it was surprising that Zelensky lashed out with claims against other European leaders too. He was not satisfied with either Europe's determination or the volumes of supplied weapons and financial aid. Brussels' reaction followed immediately. The evening before, Ursula von der Leyen presented a roadmap on Ukraine, in which Euro officials satisfied all of Kiev's requests. $800 billion, accelerated EU accession by 2027, and guarantees of support up to 2040. Viktor Orban commented on this. This is what we have come to. He promised that Hungary would not leave this unanswered. A launch of a national petition is planned, designed to convey a clear message to Brussels. Budapest does not intend to pay. In Europe, Donald Trump's decision to rule out the possibility of a forceful seizure of Greenland and suspend the trade confrontation was assessed positively. The official position voiced in response calls for sitting at the negotiating table. The parties must find a way to satisfy US security requests in the Arctic, but at the same time observe the red lines designated by Denmark. However, there is an understanding that for Trump, no red lines exist. US Vice President J.D. Vance characterized the behavior of European leaders as posturing. In public, they puff out their chests, demonstrating independence, but in closed conversations, all their obstinacy disappears. According to Vance, Trump simply ignores these public gestures and continues to bend his line, acting exclusively in the interests of the American people. Next, about the financial side of the issue. How Trump plans to shift expenses to Europe and who will pay for Ukraine's restoration. Politico revealed details of the so-called Marshall Plan, a compensation package to Kiev for military losses. Military observer Yuri Podolyaka analyzed this plan, calling it very curious and one that puts many things in their places. According to the plan, $800 billion should be injected into the Ukrainian economy by 2040. The financing structure looks as follows. $500 billion is expected from international financial institutions, IMF, World Bank. Podolyaka emphasizes that these organizations do not give money away. These are loans that will have to be repaid. An important point, these loans will not be issued to Russia. 100 billion euros must be provided by Europe in the form of direct budget support. 207 billion euros, also from Europe, but in the form of investment guarantees.